Hello, and welcome back to Fiction Hack, the podcast where we attempt to enhance our appreciation of the modern story by talking about movies and TV shows and books and stuff. My name is Colin Munro, and this is my co-host,
Ross Lawhead.
So, Ross,
Yes.
you've kept me in the dark a little bit about this week's episode.
Yeah.
Now we're recording. I think you should
Now's
tell
the
me
time
what we're
to
going to...
spring it on you. All right.
Yes.
So we're going to be talking about Doctor Who today. And
Oh.
I know that you've wanted to hold back on this topic because we discussed it in the past because you're wanting to wait until we get to the new series. But
Well, it
don't
does have a
think you
release date now.
realize-
Go on. Sorry.
No, I don't think you realize how much there is to talk about Doctor Who.
Okay.
So we may well be doing a 4-parter when all is said and done. We won't do them all back to back, but I thought we would just start talking about the first couple Doctors. In fact, just kind of the first few years, how it started and why it's remarkable, and all sorts of interesting things. By the time this goes out anyway, we'll be halfway to October. So, okay, wait, you said we've got a release date for the for an airing date?
Yeah, no, it's not a release date, but I think Doctor Who, I'm just looking up now, actually, but yeah, I think they were saying by the end of September or October the new series is going to be airing.
With a couple of the last series, they've been staggering it over the Christmas break. They're doing like 6 episodes and 7 episodes or whatever. So I wonder if they're thinking
Actually,
about doing
that's
that
just
sort of
reminded me.
thing this time.
No, I think they've got 10 episodes, and
Okay.
they're starting the end of October. So it's going to be all finished. It's going to have all aired before Christmas, and then they'll do a Christmas special.
Okay.
And everything's in the can except maybe the Christmas special. I don't think they've done that yet.
Okay, I think that's a good idea. It's always a bit difficult because lately it's become hugely popular in the United States, and they're trying
Right.
to kind of interface with the U.S. way of airing TV shows, which will do, they're longer, they're typically 22, 23 episodes, and they'll do half of them, 10 or 12, and then they'll take a break while they're shooting the second half, which is kind of weird and an odd way to do it. And I think with streaming services, that's changing. You can just do as many as you want and throw them up, and people will watch them. But in any case, we can talk about that sort of thing down the line. But
Yeah, I think binge watching is now becoming the norm for watching TV shows like that.
Yeah, and it's odd because not all the creators are getting on board with it. Netflix just stuck up Unenchanted, which is the new Matt Groening cartoon, who did Simpsons and Futurama. And I've watched the first 2 episodes, and the first episode is obviously a pilot in that it takes all the characters from zero, introduces them, and sets up the situation for the rest of the series, which you need to do in the first episode. But then it treats the second episode treats the viewer as if the first episode hasn't happened yet, and they're reiterating everything for people who haven't seen the pilot. But of course we have, because they're all up on Netflix right now. So they're still going by kind of an old and more out-of-date system.
Is that just though because Matt Groening is very much accustomed to doing things a certain way?
Yeah, entirely.
Having done well over 1,000 episodes of The Simpsons and probably a couple of hundred episodes of Futurama.
Yeah, these are guys who are veterans of the craft, and they've just sat down and said, "Well, we're just going to do what we've done every time," and they've done that without kind of.
I think there's still a place for that sort of television where you can just sit down and watch any episode, and it still makes sense without having to.
No, it's not that. It's treating the pilot as if people may not see it. The first episode as something that people may not watch or may not have the opportunity to watch, which of course we all do now because it's all streaming. Anyway, it's a small thing. And
anyway,
maybe
let's get back to Doctor Who. We can talk about The Simpsons and Matt Groening maybe. In
so
episode.
Doctor Who started in November 1965. The first episode was aired on the 23rd of November. And that is an important date, actually, because if you remember from your history books...
Back to the Future?
No,
Did you say
not.
No? Well, sorry.
You
what was
got
that
really
date?
excited there for
November
a
5th, 1955.
65.
Oh, 65. Okay, sorry.
Okay, but the reason that's an important date is because that's the day after John F. Kennedy was assassinated in the United States.
Right,
So he was assassinated on the 22nd. And the first episode of Doctor Who aired the next day. The problem was that there was so much coverage of the assassination, everything kind of following it, that the producers were kind of... I guess they were a little concerned, but they felt that Doctor Who may not have gotten a fair shake. What with all of everybody's attention being on this huge world event, or what was being treated as a world event. And so what happened was that they redid it the next week. They aired a second first episode, and it's not just a rerun, it's a second first episode because at that time it was almost impossible to record from a television camera. You could broadcast with a television camera, but you couldn't really record it.
Yeah, what they used to do is they would, with some TV shows, they would actually film. They would film a TV screen just so they could record if they wanted it to be recorded.
Yeah,
what you're watching is actually a film of of the live TV show.
Yeah, well, that's what we've got now from the Doctor Who episodes because they were all broadcast live. It was kind of like a play on a soundstage, and the characters would just, literally walk across the soundstage to a different part of the set that would be, another planet, maybe a different part of the set, and so in very rare circumstances, and it got more common as it went on, if there was an exterior set or location, then they would actually use cinema film. To do that, and then they'd feed that through the projector. They did that
right up to the 80s, maybe even early 90s. I remember even in sitcoms, stuff that's recorded in front of an audience, like Faulty Towers. Do you remember the famous scene where he goes out and smashes his car up with a stick?
Yeah,
that you can clearly see. Yeah, yeah.
That they're using a certain sort of film stock, and it's kind of a weird thing because for a television set, with the cameras themselves, you need all that electricity going into them. So that's your first limitation. And then, of course, with electricity, you can't, carry that around with you outside with all the damp and the wet in the 1960s. And then also you need the lights, of course, and there's the studio equipment to actually broadcast it from where you are to all across the country. You just couldn't do that when you're outside at that time. And then, once you do get outside, when you do use the film, then you don't need as much light if you know how to use the film quality and stuff like that. So there's all sorts of technical reasons, but I think it is interesting to watch those early episodes with the knowledge that this is all happening live, essentially. Every once in a while, they try and make a big deal about doing some sort of live drama event on TV, and it's going to be, you've got to tune in at a certain time, and then they do a second showing for people on the West Coast here in the United States that airs on their prime time, and West Wing did it, and
they did a live episode of West Wing.
They did a live episode of West Wing. It was kind of like a what do they call it? Like a presidential debates sort of thing. So again, they made it easy on themselves by keeping it in an interior location. They didn't go outside. It's just a set script that you could. With that one, it was great because they could actually put the script on the auto cues for the actors.
Yeah, like they do in those debates. Yeah.
They played up a moment. They wrote in a moment where one of the debaters, Sanchez, looks like he's forgotten his lines, but the character has decided that he's thinking and he's going to do something else that's not on the auto cue. So they made it look like something went wrong, but really nothing did. And then they tried to do another one with Richard Dreyfuss, and it was I think it's called Red Alert. It was the book that Dr. Strangelove was based on. They dramatized that as a play and then tried to do that as a live broadcast. That was years ago. So they keep trying to come back to this.
Another famous one was War of the Worlds. Didn't they do? Didn't Orson Welles do a War of the Worlds? And everyone thought people thought it was real. Oh no, was that recorded? That was
that was radio, and this is kind of. Radio was treated the same way, and this is what television was carrying on more from radio than it was.
Yeah, it goes back then. People were still sort of producing things from with techniques that had been developed for radio, but just sort of transferring them over to TV.
Yeah. Yeah, instead of just having the actors, talking to their microphones, they paid them to move around a little bit, and then they broadcast that. But by the mid '60s, they were quite sophisticated, even though they were still having to do these live broadcasts of all of these weekly shows. And once you know that, it kind of makes sense that 1 week a character wouldn't be there. Well, he's on holiday. They've written him out for that reason. And, with all the scenes, you have to be careful that you write it in a certain way that the actors have time enough to go to their next scene and stand in the place where they need to be and, have the camera swing around. And so, you have to edit it in a certain way. You have to pace it in a certain way. And with those two first episodes of Doctor Who now, everybody kind of acknowledges that the second episode is pretty much the best one to go from. And that's the one that's included mostly on the DVDs, just because, they'd done it once before and they'd worked out a lot of the kinks. So that was the start of Doctor Who. And it's interesting watching those first episodes, those first couple years, with the first Doctor, William Hartnell. He's not portrayed as a Time Lord or alien. That all comes much later, towards the end of the second Doctor's tenure. At the beginning, we don't really know who he is or what he's doing. He's got this time machine that he runs around in, and you get the idea that he's been roaming around with his granddaughter for some time before the other two main characters are introduced, these two school teachers who join the Doctor on his travels. And it's actually more useful to talk about Doctor Who in terms of the producers as much as the Doctors, because they're kind of it's attracted some good talent. We call them now showrunners. Back then, they were just the producers or the head producers. Verity Lambert was the first one. She was pretty much one of the first and biggest female producers in the BBC in a time where it was not a female-friendly environment. You could still argue that it may not be now. But it was quite unusual for a female to rise to that position. She was quite young as well, and she was very good. She was very good for the show. She really built it and got it on its feet and on track to what we understand the show to be now. Even though it did go through a lot of conceptual changes. One of which
is she
was
kind of the creator of the show? If she was the first
not really
producer,
not
or
really.
Was it more of a team effort?
It was pretty much a team effort, and this is kind of the point I'm making is that not all of the elements were there at the beginning, especially with the space alien kind of dynamic. The time travel was, and that was pretty much it, really. They just said, let's make these characters, let's give them a time machine. And one of the selling points of the TV show was that it was going to be educational. It would air, kind of 6 p.m. School obviously would be finished, and they would, do a little bit of a science fiction thing, which was popular at the time. But then they'd also do a kind of educational aspect, an educational slant, with certain episodes. Marco Polo was an early one. They did the Crusades.
Right, yeah.
And
So
it would be like
jumping in and out of history and things. So.
Yeah. So you learn a little bit, and then, a little bit later, then they'd give you a break, and, you'd have a space alien. But one of the... So the first episode kind of had to do with cavemen and going back to primordial time, primeval time, and the second story. So the first story was about 5 or 6 episodes. Sort of tune in next week for the next installment of this new Doctor Who show, and then so they did 6 episodes of that. And then the 6 episodes after that were the Daleks. They introduced those right up at the front. And those, of course, were hugely popular. People went nuts over these sort of armored aliens that really hadn't seen anything like it before. And not much like it since then either. And I think the science fiction aspect of the show quickly outpaced the historical value of it, and I think the producers probably leaned into it as a budgetary reason as well, because you could put up a bunch of spray painted plasterboard and call that a futuristic room, whereas it's hard to, unless you're doing a whole bunch of tents or something like that to give a sort of historical feel, especially if you can't go out and shoot on a castle or something like that. Usually what they would
at least you're going to need a lot of costumes and stuff. And
exactly. Well, but this is the BBC, see, and this is what they were thinking is what they would have the opportunity to do. And they did, from time to time, which was, if somebody's shooting a production of Henry V over on this soundstage, well, let's just borrow their sets and props and costumes, and we'll do a Doctor Who that's set in the 1400s in France. Or something like
so they were sort of writing episodes that they could shoot on sets that they had just lying around
as a cost saving measure. But like I said, that really got thrown to the wayside after the first few years. I think logistically it was probably just too difficult, and people were enjoying the science fiction thing anyway. Yeah. So they
I
kind of leaned into
one thing. You can tell me if this is true or not. That the reason that the Doctor even now goes around in a 1950s police box is because. Yep. Originally, it was supposed to be that the TARDIS could change its shape into anything, but the circuits or whatever that control that part of the TARDIS broke, or at least that was the way that the producers explained the fact that. But maybe originally they were intending to have it appear as something else that fitted in the scenery of each thing, but then they decided to just for budgetary reasons to stay with the police phone box.
That was one of the first things they did was to make an excuse for the chameleon circuit, as they call it in the show. And it was never intended that the TARDIS would ever change its shape or look. The police box was picked because there were still police boxes around that time, and it would have been inconspicuous at the time the show started. But yeah, they never intended that. Other characters do have TARDISes in the show, and they do change to blend in with the scenery. So yeah, when the Master pops up every once in a while, if he does have a TARDIS, then it will look like a Greek column, or it will look like a... there's one guy who has one. It looks like an altar, because he's posing as a monk. So he hides it in a church, and it makes it look like an altar. So you climb inside, but then once you climb inside, you're in the TARDIS anyway. But yeah, I think they had always intended the police box to be the Doctor's TARDIS, and it is just a budgetary thing. They built one of them, and they didn't have to build any more because of that. But yeah, so. Yeah. I don't know if you want to talk about anything else. I thought we'd talk a little bit about that, and then try to talk about the second Doctor. I could also give you just some episodes if people want to kind of jump in to some of these early stories. If you're wanting to look at the first Doctor episodes, some of them are very good, some of them are very bad, unfortunately. And there's a sad thing with the first Doctor is that he started to go a little bit senile as he was feeling. He had kind of early onset dementia. And
who, the actor or the character?
The actor himself. So he would often flub lines, and his co-actors would have to pick up the ball. He would forget names of the characters, and that was kind of written in as one of the Doctor's quirks. There were times where he just couldn't shoot due to health reasons, and so they would have to quickly write him out of the script. There's one in a very good series called The Time Meddler, where they have to put him basically they lock him up in a cell for, I think, like 2.5 episodes, and they've taped his voice and they play it through the door. So he's in the episode, although he's not actually present. So that's a kind of sad fact of it, because he's a great actor. He was fantastic for the part, and he really added a whole lot to the show. They did a sort of a quasi-documentary, a sort of biopic television thing about the early days of Doctor Who that Mark Gatiss wrote.
Yeah, and it was with what's his name, David Bradley played.
Yes, that's right. He did a very good job. I think he's fantastic. They brought him in to be the first Doctor in the last Christmas special, but and that kind of gave across just the I think that the passion that this actor had for the character, and he really did. And all the actors have loved the character and have done something to make it theirs. And we can talk all about that a little bit later on. But it became practicality to kind of minimize the Doctor's role in some of the stories, and then eventually just to write him out entirely, which is when we got the first regeneration. But we'll just talk first about some of the stories to hit. If you want to see some of those very early episodes, the first episode is called The Unearthly Child, and that's what they refer to as the first 6 episodes, the kind of Unearthly Child story. And then it goes into the Daleks next, and then Edge of Destruction. And Edge of Destruction is fun because I think it's just 2 episodes, which are kind of between 2 stories, and it all takes place in the TARDIS, and the characters have lost a bit of their memories, and they're trying to figure out what's going on and where they are. It's a very early kind of bottle episode, what we now call bottled episode, where nothing happens outside of the set. But it is.
Do you know where people can watch these? Are they on Netflix or BBC iPlayer or something like that?
They'll pop up on streaming services every once in a while. I think Hulu got the rights to do some of the early ones, but they didn't put much up. The absolute best place to get them is on DVD. The BBC does. They have just got all the bells and whistles out for the DVD editions of these. So you buy one DVD, you get the 6, 7, sometimes 12 episodes that the story is, and then they'll put all sorts of special features. So there will be at least one commentary. There will be maybe 3 or 4 documentaries. One of them will be about the actual show, the making of it, the filming of it, with interviews of the people who made it, because most of them are all still around. And then they'll maybe have a little special about the books or the comics or the commercials or the annuals. They'll have some sort of feature one, and then they'll have like other little snippets, maybe deleted scenes if they've got them, all sorts of stuff. So it's a great investment. I watch all of the special features whenever I get one of those, except the commentaries, because I'm not too interested in who was wearing a wig and what the weather was like when they were shooting this scene and that kind of thing. But
weren't there some episodes that were lost that they recently found, but there's still some that have never been found?
There's a ton that have been lost. So, what happened was that the BBC did keep archives, like you were describing. Just film a television screen and just have that be the record for the show. And
but film is big and clunky. You can't.
It's kind of big and clunky, but
everything. Then that's a lot of storage space they're going to need. It's not like now where you can just keep hours and hours and hours of footage on a hard disk.
Sure, exactly. And this is what happened, is that at one point in the 70s, I think, those all got cleared out. And they said, okay, everything in this room, get rid of it, and we'll start again, basically. So, it would have been just canisters of film that were driven out to, they think it's a landfill underneath a highway, a motorway, I don't know which one, but it would have been outside of London, that all these film canisters are now in, just, decaying or already decayed or in semi-decay. And it's not just Doctor Who, it was Z-Cars, it was, what
Dad's
else
Army.
was
I think
on?
there was some...
Probably Dad's Army,
they recently re-shot one of the lost episodes of Dad's Army and got quite a lot of actors to play all the characters. I don't know if you saw that. I didn't see it either, but
no, I missed that one. But they are, and I mean they've been looking for these episodes, the lost Doctor Who episodes, for decades, literally decades, because the fan base has been so active and sort of almost militarized and organized. There's been a huge demand for these episodes when they find them, and they'll pop up every once in a while. They found some, I think, in Kenya or Nigeria, because they wanted to show these TV shows in Africa, and so they said, we'll send the film down and you can broadcast that. So some of them have been shot by fans just from their own televisions, and then you can use some of that footage. Usually it's at a different frame rate, so there's a little bit of technical jiggery that has to go on to match it with the audio. So they've got all the audio from these episodes, just not the video. And what they've done with some of the more important ones even is to say, well, look, we're only missing a couple episodes, or only one episode of this storyline. So they actually hired an animation studio to animate underneath the sound that they've already got, the original sound from the production. Mm-hmm. And then you've got some visuals to go along with that. So, and yeah, it keeps popping up every once in a while. I was surprised that Enemy of the World was one of the most recent ones that resurfaced about 5 years ago. And that was a good one because it had the Doctor, the actor who was playing the Doctor played two parts. Patrick Troughton was playing the Doctor and then the bad guy, the enemy. That it's good that we have that performance now because he was a good actor, and it's kind of fun it's a fun conceit, you know. It's the old Prisoner of Zenda kind of story about the hero looking the same as one of the other characters in the story. Not really the villain, but
so
the
Patrick Troughton was the second Doctor?
Yeah. Okay, let me go back to the first one. I'll just tell you the episodes to hit. So we got those first three, the Unearthly Child, Daleks, the Edge of Destruction. The next one I would suggest is The Keys of Marinus, which is an 8-parter. And it's one of those things where it's like we have to get all these different keys so we can unlock the thing and do the thing. But the fun part is that they've made each mission to find a key a different type of story. So one of it is kind of an eerie horror kind of monster movie kind of thing. And another one is actually a courtroom drama where the Doctor just kind of goes in and argues on this alien planet with a really kind of ropey, to be generous, legal system. And it's just an interesting kind of, a fun kind of story that is pretty tense in some moments and, creative in its use of special effects. Then we've got the Dalek Invasion of Earth, which is, again, a longer I think it's another 8-parter. It takes place in a sort of post-apocalyptic London, which is kind of fun, and especially if you realize that this is all happening within living memory of World War II. You've got people talking about, who've been damaged in war and who are living with the effects of war. And that's one that has a lot of exterior locations. So you're getting a larger budget now. They can afford to go out and film on location in some of these places. And then we mentioned this one earlier, the Time Meddler, which is when Doctor Who comes across another time traveler who has a TARDIS as well. And although still Time Lord hasn't been mentioned, you get the idea that these two people are kind of playing the same game just in different ways. And so that's another interesting one as well. So then we get to the second Doctor. There's a short adventure called the 10th Planet, which is just a 4-parter, I believe, and it has the Cybermen in it. And these are the kind of early Cybermen without any sort of cybernetic parts at all. It's just a balaclava mask and some spray-painted cardboard that's been taped to their chest, and they crawl out of bubble wrap, I believe. They just kind of claw their way through these large sheets of plastic from their cyberpods, or whatever they decide to call them. So they had a kind of full adventure with those guys, and unfortunately the last episode is the one that's been lost, but that's been recreated by this animation technique. All that they've got now is just the snippet at the end, about 40 seconds. The
last William Hartnell episode.
The last ever William Hartnell episode has been lost. And this is the one that's been most sought for because it is the last William Hartnell episode. But they've got the last, like I say, 40 seconds, which is the regeneration. And the only reason they have that is because the Blue Peter, which is a, as you know, television show for children in Britain, wanted to show that in a part of their segment where they were talking about TV special effects. And so they said, we'll get you a clip of that so you can show it on the show. And they just kind of forgot to send it back to them. So it was not destroyed by accident. No, well, they don't know. Okay, this is, there's two different stories. The story is, here's the episode, take what you need from it and give it back to us. And they lost it. Or they said, we'll give you the clip of that sequence that you need. And they gave it to them, and then the other part was destroyed. So depending on who you talk to, a different thing may have happened. But in any case, we do have that moment where, it's kind of funny because they didn't write it into the show. The Doctor wins and he beats the Cybermen and he gets back onto the TARDIS, and then he just kind of keels over and then transforms into a different person. And it was quite effective. The way that they've chosen to do it played to the strengths of the visual effects at the time. And then in the next episode,
it's a different actor.
It's a different actor. He just pops up, and he is still called the Doctor, and he still believes himself to be the same person. Although the genius part is that they did not hire someone who looked like William Hartnell to be William Hartnell and act like William Hartnell. They hired someone who was very different. He was much younger for a start. He looked very different just in terms of physique, and he acted very different as well. He had a different personality. He runs around and he puts on different clothes. He starts to play a little jig on a pipe, and he has this strange fascination for hats, which he never had before.
Right.
And
so he's got his own sort of different new personality.
He's got a different personality, although they still insist that he's the same person.
Before we go into the second Doctor, just quickly, didn't you say at the beginning in the first episode, William Hartnell was, or the first Doctor was going around with his grandchildren?
Yeah, he had a granddaughter.
Right. So was she a Time Lord or was she a human? She must have been a Time Lord, right?
It wasn't explained, and this is the thing, is that the Time Lord concept didn't exist until the end of Patrick Troughton's run. So they just kind of said, and there were actually movies that were made for Doctor Who, and
there's never been any hint that he had children, let alone grandchildren, in
well,
later
in the movies
episodes.
there were, because it's explicitly stated in the movies. And shoot, who's the guy who plays Tarkin in the Star Wars? I know we're not supposed to mention Star Wars, but who is it that he...
oh, yeah, I know who you mean. Yeah. The guy they computer generated for Rogue One.
Peter
Cushing.
Peter Cushing. Okay. So they made some Doctor Who movies starring Peter Cushing, and it's explicitly stated in there that he is a mad human inventor who's made a time machine. And I don't even know if his granddaughter is a character. I think she may be in the first one. I only have vague memories of those. They're not as good, and they're not canon either. Right. But yeah,
and
so he's got a granddaughter.
This was after William Hartnell started it off, then, or
it was during. It wouldn't have been during the regeneration. This would have been because again the Daleks feature large in it, and they were made for film in the 60s. So he's got a granddaughter in the TV show, and she gets left on Earth. She falls in love with someone during the Dalek invasion of Earth storyline, and the Doctor just leaves her there. I think, carrying on from that, I think there is another Time Lord on Earth who is regenerating, who doesn't have the ability to time travel, and people keep speculating on whether they'll bring that back, if they'll kind of circle around to that, but there doesn't seem to be any kind of desire by the makers of the shows to go back to that concept.
Yeah, because it feels like they've denied the fact that he has a granddaughter, because he's always been sort of very independent and not emotionally dependent on other people. So then to then bring that back in, and then they'd have to explain why he's forgotten or denied that she exists all these years.
It's actually, I think that kind of tendency is actually a strength of the show, because every once in a while they'll throw in a idea or a rule for the universe that then gets kind of written out or retconned. So I think, unfortunately, the Doctor's granddaughter has been retconned for all intents and purposes. There is another episode, The Brains of Morbius, where the Doctor is revealed to have had past lives past the first Doctor, which everybody hated. So they just now ignore that was introduced, and said they have definitively said that the William Hartnell Doctor is the first regeneration of the character of the Doctor that we know.
The first generation, not regeneration.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's made everything a little bit more robust, that they allow themselves to actually write out some of these rules. Another one that, Stephen Moffat kept insisting that the Doctor only had 12 regenerations, because every Time Lord only has 12 regenerations, which again counters a lot of other instances in the series where characters have had more than 12 generations, where characters have just kind of blown through a couple generations just because they don't like how the character looks. That happened with one of the characters. And for some reason he just insisted that there are only 12. So now we're up to 14. He wrote some sort of clever thing about how they can get out of it. I think they're just going to ignore that down the line. They're just going to say, well, we'll just keep regenerating the character, because why would you want to put a cap on it, especially when it's more popular
especially
than
when
it's
it's
been.
being exactly. So they want to keep making it.
Exactly.
So moving on to the second Doctor.
Patrick Troughton, who was a fairly well-known actor around the time. Is very, very solid. Was able to do a lot. Especially in terms of physicality, which the first Doctor was kind of being limited against certain things. And I think we've seen at this point an almost complete abandonment of any kind of educational pretext. I can't think of many episodes at all that take place kind of in the past without also kind of introducing some sort of science fiction element into it. Like, we have to go into the Roman era to stop them from using this machine to help defeat the Romans and this kind of thing. They would kind of introduce historical elements, but that would only be as another facet to some sort of science fiction problem. They started to loosen up a little bit in terms of kind of production value with some of the episodes. They're very kind of 60s and very kind of mod in that kind of term. So they're trying to be a little bit stylish, try to appeal to maybe a kind of, not a younger audience, but a kind of mid-age audience. So not just a show for school kids to watch with their dads, but also something that teens would probably want to get into as well. And I'd say that the high points of those episodes, that of the second Doctor, would probably be the power of the Daleks, which is one of those lost episodes, lost stories. They've only got, I think, just one episode of it. It's an 8-parter. One of the episodes apparently is all from the Daleks' point of view. It's just the Daleks, putting forth their plan, and that was a way just to give the regular cast a bit of a break in the middle of the season. They wrote an entire Daleks episode,
and they've done similar things in even very recent series.
Yeah,
I think we may have talked about this before. It might have been someone
the
else.
Richard Davis runs would have one episode where the Doctor was seen only for a couple scenes. That's right. We were talking about it because one of the best episodes is Blink with the Stone Angels, and the Doctor's only in a couple scenes that are obviously very, very easy to shoot, and that was explicitly done. So David Tennant can have a bit of a break from running around, which he
and then
needed.
Also there's another couple of episodes, I don't know if in the same season or no, it must be a later season, where there's the one that's all in that little bus. And that doesn't have the Doctor's assistant in, Catherine Tate at the time.
Yeah.
And then the next episode, or the previous episode, is an episode that's all about Catherine Tate and the Doctor's not in it.
Exactly. So that was Midnight is the episode where Donna Noble has been effectively written out of it. They're on a holiday planet, and she decides she's going to go to a day spa instead of go on this little bus tour. That's a great episode, very strong episode. And then the next one is
we'll get to that. We'll get to that in the future episode. Yeah. Let's carry on with the second Doctor.
The second Doctor, it also has he's got new companions as well. He's traded up a couple times at this point. One of them is Jamie, who's the kind of Scottish Jacobist who has fallen in with the Doctor. So you've got someone from the past as a companion, which I think works pretty well. Nowadays, they exclusively have modern day companions as a rule, but there have been some pretty good companions that have been taken from the past. Well, not within the actual show itself, but the producers have stated that, they're under the impression that this is what you need for a modern audience, is a modern kind of viewpoint character. So you don't get these kind of characters taken from the past or the future or whenever, which I think is a shame. But that's what they've decided to do. They also seem to think that it needs to be a love interest, which I think they're probably going to steer away from that with the next Doctor. But we'll have to see about that. But he's fun because there's one episode where they actually change his appearance. So they're fighting this villain who plays all these kind of mind tricks with reality on them, and one of the things he does is just change Jamie to look like someone else. And so it is another actor, and it's not to give him a break. It's because he got chicken pox, and
Right.
it was too hard to cover up the scars, and they decided to just give him a break anyway. So they got another actor in to play the same character in the same wardrobe, same clothes, same everything. And then at the end of it, he just pops back up as himself, the same actor again, and says, "Oh, Jamie, you're looking more yourself. I'm glad to see you." I was like, "Yes, Doctor, I'm happy to be back." So it gets pretty silly sometimes, but still they do focus on the drama above the. And okay, I should point out that at this point, it is not Doctor Who is not kind of got famously bad production values. That comes in kind of the late 70s and 80s. It got kind of notorious for the sets wobbling and the monsters falling over and all that sort of thing. But at this point, it was still very straight-faced. And although there were moments of slight humor,
you see,
it was never funny as a show.
It's like the radio thing. Back then, they would make something, shoot it out, it would be broadcast on the radio or the TV, and nobody thought people would still be watching it 50, 60 years later.
True. Yeah. Their whole goal was just to get you to watch the next one, which again with TV, that's pretty much the goal. But yeah, you couldn't go back. You couldn't. You couldn't rewatch these things unless they showed them again. I think they only. The first time they rebroadcast any Doctor Who episodes was like in the 80s, and it was kind of like a BBC legacy sort of thing. I think they were available on VHS quite soon. Even before that, though, it did get a very strong fan base quite soon, and people would tape it from the television, and then at a convention or just in a car boot sale or something, you would be able to copy and trade some of these to other fans. But that, of course, would be very difficult to do, and then you'd have to have a projector and project it on your wall or a sheet or something like that.
Yeah.
So it was very hard to be a fan of Doctor Who back then, a fan of anything back then. In fact, but people still were, and the Doctor Who magazine is the longest running fan magazine in the world. It carried on even when they stopped broadcasting Doctor Who, and it's still around now. It's it's a very good magazine. I get it every once in a while. So what you're saying is exactly right. There was no kind of sense of continuity, or you couldn't rely on people's idea or understanding of continuity. But I think the producers did find and understand that there was a fan base for this that was paying attention to these things after a while, and they started to give them more of what they liked and shape the show around the viewers and what they found exciting. And so I think some of the other good episodes to hit. Enemy of the World we've talked about. Tomb of the Cybermen is quite good. There's I would say that a lot of, I think the Patrick Troughton ones are generally pretty strong. There are very few kind of weak episodes. The last story was called The War Games, and it was kind of a grand send-off for the second Doctor. So they knew that Patrick Troughton was going to leave the show. It's kind of a meandering kind of story, because it's clearly a story that should have been 4 to 6 episodes, but they decided to make it 8. And one of the things they kind of have set up 2 alien races that are using the Earth as a kind of battlefield, and so they're drawing armies from different eras of Earth's history. Some of them are Romans, some of them are German Nazis, just kind of whatever props the BBC had lying around that they could use, would kind of fight these wars with a lot of explosions and exterior locations, and people getting captured and people escaping. It's the first time that we see the sonic screwdriver, which is used, believe it or not, to remove a screw. Which I think is brilliant. I don't think it's ever been used for that again. And it's the first time that we actually hear the phrase Time Lord. Right. And you find out that one of these people is a Time Lord who is kind of enabling these wars to take place. A kind of a rogue Time Lord agent who shouldn't be doing what he's doing. An interesting thing, there's an interesting moment where the Doctor and this other guy just kind of look at each other and instantly recognize each other as Time Lords, even though they look exactly human. So you're getting a kind of another kind of layers of lore being very subtly introduced. Yeah,
but that's interesting because I know that in later seasons that the Doctor hasn't been able to recognize the Master, for example.
Yeah.
When he's seen him, because he hasn't been familiar with that regeneration of him.
Correct. So, yeah. Again, these things kind of come and go as the drama dictates, really. So they just want to make the best story for what they're writing at that time. And again, these are it's such a long running show that it's we're talking about generations really of writers who are coming in and going. There have only been
most people working on the show now. I mean, like take Peter Capaldi for example. He was like a massive fan of the show when he was a kid. He even wanted to be the president of the Doctor Who fan club or something. There's a story about that, and even Stephen Moffat, was a big fan as a kid. So.
There's only been one director who carried on from the old series and the new series. I can't remember his name. And then I don't think any writers have, although they kind of got some fan writers to write some of the novels, and then those some of the writers from the novels. But
there can't be that many people who were working in the 60s who are still working in the 2018.
True. And unfortunately, we started to lose some of them as well.
Yeah.
Verity Lambert died. I think Dick Sherwin died. Some of the writers have certainly. Malcolm Hulke kind of died in the 80s, I believe. Robert Holmes, another big writer, isn't with us anymore. So we're losing these people, unfortunately. It is very much a kind of legacy program where the torch gets passed, from. This is why I was saying, it's helpful to think of it in terms of producers and the actual developers of the show as it is with the Doctors themselves, because every new producer has got a new take that he brings onto it. Sometimes they lean a little bit more into science fiction, sometimes a little bit more into horror, sometimes a little bit more into action. Or
history,
exactly. It's a show that really has a life of its own. I think everybody wants to say that about whatever TV show they're working on, but I think with Doctor Who it is true in that it's had so many contributions, and it just kind of grows and adapts, and bits of it kind of die and fall off, but other bits of it just kind of blossom. So it is very. It's a show that you really can get your teeth into if you want to. You can go as deep as you want to go. There are people who, whose aim it is to watch or listen to every episode and write a little journal about it. Those have even been published and stuff. You can get all sorts of books from all sorts of people about the production of the show, or you can just focus on the stories themselves. One part of it I like is that there's an audio drama that is produced by a company called Big Finish that has been running for quite a while now, and it's got the actors who played the Doctors in the 70s and 80s to come back and do new shows, just audio dramas, and you can buy those, download those. They're quite expensive because the production quality is quite high, so I think they can justify that. And they're just as good as the TV show, only without the visuals. So it's a massive subject. And as I say, we could talk every episode about this until the new one airs, and we wouldn't run out of material. We won't do that, I promise. But I think. I don't know. We could probably leave it here with that last episode of the Second Doctor. And then pick it up a few weeks' time, maybe, if we want to carry on with that. But,
right. So just in summary, then, so the first, it was really sort of finding its feet throughout the whole of the first two Doctors, and it's only at the end where they're sort of at the end of the second Doctor, Patrick Charlton, where they're defining that he's a Time Lord.
Exactly, and also we're talking about the first. How many years? I think it's 6 years. Wait, did I say 1965 the show started? It's 63. I should have said 63. I've gotten my JFK assassination date mixed up. But so the first two doctors spanned a total of 6 years. I think you can generally is roughly about 3 years each. And there have been some longer running doctors. There have been some much shorter ones as well. But again, we can talk about those later on.
We will get to them. So over the next couple of months, we will do a few more Doctor Who episodes to bring us right up to the present day.
Yeah.
But not every episode. We will do a few other ones in between.
Yeah, exactly.
So that sounds like fun. And look forward to the next one. Okay, so if you have any comments about this episode or any of the others, as always, you can tweet at us with the hashtag FictionHack, and we will try to answer your questions. And if you want to get a hold of me or follow me or Ross, my Twitter handle is at Colin_Munro. That's MUNRO. And Ross, yours
is at Ross Lawhead, all one.
Okay, great. And obviously also check out our website, where I'm sure Ross will put together some show notes.
Yeah, I'm well into the show notes.
Great. That is fictionhack.com, but with a hyphen. So fiction-hack.com. And we'll see you next time.
See you next time. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
We need to get sign-offs, like sign-off phrases. We should think of some.